and welcome back. So, we are still continuing our quantum anatomy, multidimensional anatomy topics. We already talked about the physical body, about emotional body, about mental body. And right now we are diving into the topic that for me is probably the biggest curiosity. We are diving into the subtle anatomy or subtle bodies. I usually separate them into like supramental and the spiritual body or the soul level, soul plane. But for actual simplicity for the podcast and to actually keep the podcast at the duration that I've been keeping them for like 20 minutes, I will just call it subtle bodies. Our subtle bodies are constantly in interaction with our three lower density bodies. Our three lower density bodies are our physical, emotional, and mental bodies. We sometimes call it an avatar, right? Three lower density bodies. But it's always in interaction with something more subtle, with something more fluid, with something even more magnetic. You know, what I see in practices and a lot of holistic health and healing practices that people usually focus on physical, on emotional, on mental, or on fully subtle bodies. I do believe that the true healing can actually happen when we're focusing on all the bodies simultaneously because the interaction between them is happening in between every nanosecond. There is no separation. Remind you, we separating the bodies when we talk about them just for simplicity because there is no separation. There is separation on the anatomy level, physiology level. There is separation on the way that your biophotons, ticons, and all these particles move in those layers. But for your experience, there is no separation. You are whole, right? Because we're healing to become whole, to become holy, right? And we're trying to see that, hey, only with the physical body healing, I can go this far. Only with emotional body healing, I can go a little further. Only with the mental body healing, I can go only this far. If you combine everything, your physical essence, your emotional body, your mental body, and take care of your subtle anatomy, this is, in my opinion, the path for the true healing. Because healing is wholeness. And to become whole, we actually have to take care of all of our layers simultaneously. So, what is our subtle body, right? What is it? This is basically the body that is a little further from your physicality. It's still here, fully in you most of the times if you're lucky, but it's something around the cells. It's something magnetic, something that can be measured and looked at with biophotons, and some people can see that with their inner vision, right? Everyone has different ways and modalities to see what's going on in your subtle body, but this is the body that holds the information about you. It's all informational layer medicine. Sometimes I call it that way because a lot of times people have physical body issue. They feel the pain, they feel the symptom, but the actual cause is an informational layer of the system. This can be a synonym for subtle body. And the subtle body is the one that can get affected by literally everything that you can imagine. Your subtle body responds to the music that you listen to, the people that you hang out with, to some topics that you haven't worked in the previous lifetimes on, or anything that happened to you or will happen to you. Time moves differently there too. Future cannot be determined, right? Because what actually we're understanding now, probably the first time in history, we're in the place where our stage, where we are actually co-creating our life, is changing simultaneously. A few hundred years ago, we were sure that Rome is still going to be Rome, or any type of city will still have the borders that it had 100 years ago. Now we are in the stage of our evolution and the history where actually the stage where we're playing our co-creation is changing simultaneously with us changing. And this is scary, fascinating, exciting, and everything in between. So with the subtle bodies, that alignment can be felt. The goal when I see patients for me is like to make sure that they have vertical alignment, because a lot of times after certain traumas or certain experiences, people become horizontally aligned. What I mean by that, certain traumas can actually scatter your existence, and all the different bodies of yours, your physical body, your emotional body, your mental body, your subtle bodies, they can start living different lives. When I say living different lives, you still will experience that as you, but you might see that some influences that would actually should have a lot of effect for a physical body doesn't change anything emotionally. It doesn't even penetrate. Vice versa. Sometimes you do emotional healing and you feel like, Why is it not penetrating into my physical cell? Why I don't feel the relief? Why I don't feel any better after actually doing this for myself? And this is where the question of vertical alignment comes online. Specifically, traumas, like deep traumas like physical abuse, sexual traumas, deep emotional abuse, and all these things can actually make you being horizontally aligned instead of vertically aligned. And then the healing is to actually bring back the alignment. Usually alignment can be brought back when we actually working on the informational or subtle body, because that's the body that is the most magnetic. And the magnetism is pulling you into whatever direction you are plugged in. And with the subtle bodies, we also can see that a lot of people have some subtle body issues per se, or any type of imbalances, because we are just not made for the life that we are living now. There's so much stimulation. There's so many elements that are pulling us into different directions simultaneously at the same time. That is something that your subtle body doesn't like. Subtle body likes stability, it likes connection, it likes being in alignment. And the daily life that we're living now, it's kind of difficult to stay in that, especially when you're constantly bombarded with the stimulation. So we also understand that most of us cannot leave our lives and just be a monk somewhere in Tibetan mountains. And fundamentally, a lot of us would not even be happy. With all that being said, the actual true healing and the actual true understanding of the subtle anatomy actually comes with understanding and acknowledging that every layer of you has the role. There is no layer that is more or less important. The only way for you to feel whole and then wholly, if that's the goal, is to actually have all the layers of you fully aligned and as healthy as possible. Subtle body, since it's influenced by so many elements simultaneously, it can get affected really quickly. And don't be surprised that something that happens for your subtle body, let's say you're experiencing or bringing some old traumas, that might not necessarily translate into your physical body right away. It takes time. The movement, the way that we perceive time, the way that in general what time is in different layer of you, it works completely different. And the way that it works in the physicality and your subtle anatomy, we have two completely different universes. So for us to understand the subtle body anatomy, we also have to keep in mind that, hey, everything that we know about the physicality might work completely different in the subtle layers of our existence. And it requires a lot of mental power, because a lot of times you have to hold two realities at the same time simultaneously, right? I'm acknowledging and working on the physicality, and at the same time, I'm creating the space of understanding for the subtle anatomy of that system. Because you probably notice that some people have a tendency to like measure the trauma, right? They be like, oh, if I would have experienced that, I wouldn't react this way. Well, because subtly, we all have different blueprints. Your blueprint is literally put in the physicality. Well, that translation, the way that it actually translates in the physicality, creates your system to be completely different than the other person's. We know physically we have the same anatomy. We know that emotional body moves differently. We know that mental patterns are very similar. We study that in psychoanalysis, and we can really track so many things with it. In the subtle anatomy, a lot of those laws and regulations and rules, they don't apply. Imagine that beautiful blueprint being squished in the physicality. Well, your receptivity to certain things, your sensitivity to certain things would be completely different. We can have two women experience a sexual trauma, but they both would live completely different lives after. Yes, psychologically, psychoanalysis based, we can actually see that there might be some patterns that they are repeating. There might be some trauma-based behavior. But, there is the saying that no children actually grow up in the same family. Even siblings don't grow up in the same family. And what I mean by that, well, the birth order, the economical situation of your parents, the mood of your parents, the stability, the occupation of your parents, everything is changing. We are different every single day. So nothing is stagnant. And like actually seeking the stagnation is the worst goal that you can have for your healing. I know that it sounds peaceful, it sounds tempting, and it would be nice just to stay in pace for so long, but what we're actually seeking, it's actually balance and our ability to bounce back after certain experiences. Again, different blueprints, because a lot of times you will hear me calling subtle body a blueprint. That blueprint, that information layer, when it's squished into your physicality, it will have different sensitivities than other people. It will have different preferences. And your job is to actually learn what your preference is and how can you actually rule your life around it, not trying to run from it. You won't be able to outrun it because that's the layer that is always there. That layer for a lot of people needs the most healing. But you clearly know that to find someone who understands how the subtle body uh, issues, energetic hijacking, or all these things, how they're translating into the physicality, it's pretty difficult. Because with my experience, I actually noticed that there are three main reasons for any condition to happen. We have too much information, we have depleted information, like aka not enough information, or we have hijacked information. These things are contributing to all the main conditions that we can find on the physical, emotional, and mental bodies. Where that information can get hijacked, it can definitely be in the subtle layer of yours. If you're constantly in the environment that is going against your blueprint, it's just a matter of time until that's going to translate into your physical body. Some people are lucky. Some people actually, luck is a strong word, right? Some people are not experienced the discomfort in the physicality quickly enough to actually track the pattern. What I mean by that, your physical body can start getting sick decades, 5 years, 2 years after the experience that hijacked your subtle body. That's why I'm saying that holding that idea that time moves differently and an impact is different is necessary when we actually trying to understand the subtle anatomy. Subtle anatomy that influences every single choice that you make if you are aware of it. Most of us, we never been trained to be aware of our subtle anatomy. Subtle anatomy is such a magnetic layer. There's such a vastness, so much information there. It's like a 10D puzzle. When you move one piece, everything else starts moving. So you have to know what you are doing. And I do believe that the true healing actually lays when we can align the subtle anatomy with the physicality. This is what we see in the most successful, well-rounded, successful people. Some people have success in one department, but it doesn't mean that they're actually the happiest people. And the happiness is something that, I know this is the goal for some people to always be happy. And my job sometimes to actually say that it's delusional to think that you always be happy. Life is lifing. Stage is changing simultaneously when you are creating your life. There will be the experiences that will scatter you. But actually having strong anatomy, having strong subtle body boundary allows you to bounce back, allows you to get back into your baseline without changing your baseline. There are certain experiences that are changing our baseline. And some of them can be grief. When we lose someone, we know that we are learning how to live without them. That feeling is not going away, but we are creating the new baseline. We are trying to find our way back to the new baseline that we have. That baseline a lot of times is determined by the subtle body anatomy, how healthy your anatomy is. And sometimes, we have energetic chiropractics that we have to do for the subtle body to actually adjust it back into your own alignment. And on the subtle plane, I know that a lot of times people, especially on the mainstream media, they declare that they're working on the subtle realm. They can heal all the transgenerational traumas and all of that. There's a thing called penetration. Everything that happens in the subtle reality, in the subtle part of your body, will be penetrated down. You have to address all the layers if you actually want to have different experience. Sometimes only adjusting and doing some energetic chiropractics can be enough for you to feel the difference. Absolutely. But if we're talking about the deep patterns that you've been running on for decades, your body might be used to the certain blueprint. Even that blueprint is hijacked, your body learns all the back routes, how to move the energy. Because if the subtle anatomy is healthy, we clearly see that even meridians are set up in the way where the energy can flow. Yin and yang is actually balanced. All the energy is constantly in flow. There is no stagnation. But if the subtle body anatomy is really hijacked, we start seeing that body is trying to find the back roads. You still need energy. You still need flow. Your body still needs biophotons. So there is a thing called defense system, right? That system is in charge to develop the route that would allow your body to still translate the information without that getting stuck. But you obviously know if you're taking back roads, it takes more time, it takes more fuel, and it takes more energy. So you can do that for a few years, for a few decades, but there's always the time when you max it out. And the subtle body, especially the supramental body, holds information, how the healthy cell should look like. And if that bank, imagine like your cellular bank, informational bank is hijacked, over time, your body is like, you're just replicating the same hijacked cell. There is a reason why most of us are getting sick in the mid-age. Like there's a reason why most conditions starts in our 40s, 50s. Because at that time, we max out our supramental body debt. We cannot go in debt anymore. We're actually starting to recreate the same cells over and over again that are pretty much damaged at that point. And the subtle body is the one that has to be recreated so your body can actually have access to healthier informational cells. That's like, imagine like that's a blueprint of the cell. That's an informational, digital information about your cell. That's your subtle body. We can go into the physics, we can go into the esoterics. Doesn't matter what modality you choose. Doesn't matter what type of words you choose to describe that. We are all talking about the same. We're all talking that there is a little bit more that we can see in the physicality. And that a little bit more, that subtle body, the anatomy of your subtle body, it determines how your physicality is going to look like. Vice versa, information flows both ways. There is no one-way route in the human existence. Equally as your physical body sends the signal to your subtle anatomy, equally as the music that you listen, the food that you eat, the people that you surround yourself with, it sends the information to the informational layer of you. Equally, that layer, that subtle body, that it's like such a vast architecture that even the word anatomy, sometimes it's not enough to describe that. There is the vastness of information. So many storages, so many files, so many digital information that it's constantly being transcribed and downloaded down. Imagine if that file is hijacked. If you have virus in the system, well, the whole system starts to operating not in its optimal. And in a lot of physical body conditions, like even if they're starting from the physicality, we see that over time, that affects the subtle layer of our existence. So that's why the recreation, multidimensional recreation is necessary. We have to see how that event, that trauma, actually affected your subtle body. How did that affect your physicality? How did that affect your emotional, your mental body? And then bring it all back into wholeness as much as possible. Because different experiences, obviously, they make it easier or more difficult. And the people that I'm working with usually come with the very, very complex, difficult conditions where everything affects everything at that point. And we have to find the entry point. And sometimes even the entry point for the subtle body healing can be the physicality. Sometimes we need to be healthy enough physically to even start diving into the subtle realms, understanding the subtle anatomy. And sometimes subtle anatomy and subtle body healing can actually help your physical body so profoundly that there are not words to describe and actually offer you anything else. So we have to find the way, how do we assess everything simultaneously and make the decision for the highest good of all to make sure that your system can have the healing when possible and how much is possible. So by learning about the subtle body, and we will talk about that more and more, I just wanted to have an introduction into the subtle body anatomy here. Know that it translates information to every single cell. Know that it absorbs the information from every single cell. Know that it takes the track record of everything that you were doing, will be doing, and are doing currently. One thing that I would say, the healthiest thing for your subtle anatomy is to be as present as possible. Can you imagine if you're constantly living in the trauma response, if your emotional body is constantly processing past in the present moment, how scattered your subtle anatomy would be? Over time, that scatterness will translate back into the physicality. It will hold certain healing too. So I think the last thing that I want to mention here is know that if there is an experience that actually affected you really, really much, most likely it affected your subtle anatomy too. And all these disturbances in the subtle anatomy, they will be visible at some point. And there are ways for you to actually work on that so you can actually translate and live the life that you're desiring to live. And for that, we need healing to be multidimensional. We need healing to actually penetrate your physicality, your emotional, your mental, your subtle bodies, and everything in between. Because trust me, there are a lot of sublayers in between them. Sometimes communication is what we have to recreate in order for you to experience the healing. Because trust me, there are experiences that actually hijack your body's communication in between the layers of your existence. But everything is solvable if we actually have a way to look at it multidimensionally. Sometimes it takes time, absolutely. Sometimes it can take lifetimes. But there are ways to actually heal those layers and actually have that part of us as healthy as possible, because that's the only part that we are taking with us when this avatar is long, long, long gone. So, subtle body is something that I have a lot of passion to, and this is something that I'm happy to talk about more and more. So, if that's the topic, if that's the area that you would like me to expand, I'm happy to, because I just did like a toe dipping into the subtle layers of us, because there's so, so, so much. If you think that the human self, the physical body, is very difficult and complex, wait until you start understanding the subtle realms. Nothing actually compares to that. And that's why I guess I'm in this field, because the level of complexity and the level of all the elements that can be moved is beyond our comprehension. And the funniest part, that there is no ceiling for that healing. And that's exciting. So I really, really hope that you feel as excited as I am. And please let me know if there's anything else on this topic that you would like me to dive deeper into.